Yeah, I did 40 minutes surrender sitting down meditation just before this.
How'd that go?
Yeah, fine. Eyes closed for 10 minutes, then eyes open and eyes closed, and a lot of thoughts coming, but just letting it go. Yeah, it was fine. It wasn't anything spectacular, but it was what it was.
That's right. I mean, it doesn't need to be anything spectacular, really. I mean, in fact, if it's spectacular, there's that's like a contrast, right? So that ultimately, what's permanent is something which doesn't have a lot of contrast to it necessarily, right? It's very subtle. So, if it's something which is spectacular, it's something which has a beginning and an end, right? A spectacle, right? So it's like fireworks. Fireworks have a beginning and an end, right? We're looking for that which is constant, which is necessarily going to be very subtle. It's going to be much more like almost much closer to nothing than spectacular.
Yeah.
But that's what allows you to sort of stay there, quote unquote.
Yeah. No, you're right. It's just after our last session, I was pretty buzzed, I guess. So I spent like the next day and a half just like at periods where I'm just like completely surrendered.
Yes.
And like you said, like a spa like I don't know exactly how you described it, but yeah,
Yeah. And
just very relaxing. And but I did notice that it was easier to surrender sitting on the couch, nice sun outside, than like contrasted to going down to the shop yesterday when there was like a lot of people that were really agitated and they wanted to get out of the shop, and then there was like a queue for the checkouts, and like then I kind of got agitated. I was picking up on their energy, and yeah, those kind of situations much more difficult to surrender, and thoughts go a lot faster, and I guess more identification with them for a longer space of time.
yeah, I mean, well, that that makes sense. It's just really a matter of practice, is what it comes down to. I mean, because the reality is, even in the shop, uh, there's something which is essentially unruffled, right? Does that make sense? And
Yeah, it's
I
kind
mean,
of more of it's kind of more identifying with the thoughts for that space of time, I guess,
I
rather
mean,
than
the question to keep in mind, in the back of your mind, is: are you the one who identifies with thoughts?
no.
Because think about that. Think about those moments when you are so-called identified with thoughts, right? Those thoughts of the agitated shoppers, or whatever, in the store. Um, who's identified with those thoughts precisely?
More thought.
More thought, exactly. That's right. So the very thought that you're identified with those thoughts is itself a thought.
Yeah.
So, because if you look back to that point in time when you were so-called agitated,
Mm-hmm.
what was happening to the awareness of it all?
Nothing.
Nothing, right? It was just going, right? It was just going. It was the same thing. Wasn't affected at all. So the story that we have about having been agitated also plays back in. It's like I mean, it is a story. It's exactly what it is. There's a narrative even now that wraps up the past into the story of the person who could be agitated.
Yeah.
But in fact, there's no such person. I mean,
No.
this is the sort of paradox, right? Because it's like, I mean, we're essentially engaging in a kind of self-inquiry when we talk about this, right? But when we think about it, it's like thought thought kind of circles around, and again you get back to that place of silence, right? Because what's being talked about here can't really be talked about. Exactly, that's right. But it's so simple. I mean, the reality is your spa-like relaxation of the first day and a half really didn't go anywhere in the store. It's a story that it went somewhere. And even that story doesn't affect anybody. The story of someone who is affected is also part of the story. I mean, the story is like it creates the idea of a person who is affected by the story. There's nobody affected by the story, actually.
Yeah.
The story cannot affect anybody at any time, ever.
Mm. I guess there's still an underlying belief that these negative stories should be avoided, right? Shouldn't be experienced. Even though intellectually I know that it's all that, or it's all whatever.
Yes. No. I mean, yes. I mean, and so practically, what does that mean? Practically speaking, it means it's a matter of practice. Practically speaking, it's a matter of practice.
And being able to surrender or inquire in those moments is a huge challenge, but I guess the intention never really even comes up when there is such a situation.
That's right.
Because if there wasn't such a situation, then there'd be no problem. But yeah,
that's right. That's exactly right. Yeah, I mean, there's no real need to berate yourself. It really doesn't matter at all, because as you know, as I just said, there's really nobody here who's being hurt by this. so in a way, it doesn't really matter. Just very gently, just very gently let it arise again. It's no big deal. Because in a way, that's what we're trying to cultivate, this attitude that it's no big deal, right? So if we make it a big deal that you quote unquote you lost awareness during that period of time, right? Which is, again, not really accurate, because there was something which was, it's not possible. There was something which was aware of it the whole time, and that thing which was aware of it in an unruffled, calm way, even unruffled, calm awareness of the so-called agitation, right? That's the real you.
Coming from being a follower of Shinzen Young's meditation techniques, he would say once you kind of lose track of your sensory perceptions, like maybe there was tenseness in my body that I wasn't kind of keeping track of in this situation, and then all these things built up, and then when I left the shop with my partner, it was kind of like, oh, I just had to be out of there. It's just like, so I guess I know he's different teacher to you now. He's more meditation than realization, although he's both. But what am I trying to say? Yeah, I don't know. I guess from a lot of meditation, you get to a stage where those things won't bother you, right? So there's a belief that that's better than it bothering you. So, and that will help you get to maybe enlightenment.
So, but let's investigate this issue of bothering very carefully, because it is there's a certain like I say, like that untalkable quality about this. What does it mean not to be bothered, right? So well, tell me, what do you mean by not being bothered?
It's kind of being okay with the story, yeah, which is like, because, like, there's a woman behind me and she's like, oh, I've got to be somewhere, she was saying, and we had a problem with the machine. It's the self-service machines, and I was like, oh, I better hurry up for her. But then I was like, no, I'm going to take my time. And what's just going on? But there's agitation in the body, and then there's kind of like me being frustrated that the situation where wasn't different, where I'm say I'm just totally chilled out, there's no tension in the body, and I don't care if she's bothered or not, you know. So there's a belief that I want to be in that state.
Gotcha. So right. So the point behind surrender and self-inquiry is to ask the question, you know, or to see in some sense, right? The just like you want to quote unquote have your inner feelings a certain way vis-a-vis the situation, which is to say you want to feel a lack of bodily tension even though you're in this stressful external situation. The question is, can you see that the internal feelings of frustration are also effectively an external situation? Does that make any sense? Right.
Yeah.
So the very feelings of frustration and bodily tension, they're in a sense just as external to you as the shop and the lady.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah.
Right. So the peace that is accessible at all times is the peace that is in some sense okay with frustration, okay with, and when I say frustration, I don't mean just the external shop, I mean literally the internal feelings of frustration, right? Like the
Right.
internal feelings of bodily tension, of pain, really, that's what that is, right? To experience those feelings and then realize you're not them.
Yeah.
Right? You don't even need to accept them, right? You don't even need to have this feeling like, oh, I accept these feelings.
Yeah.
Even that is, it doesn't matter, because in that moment, the simple question is, what if I, in my deepest core, relax, right? Even allowing the storm of negative feelings, of negative bodily tension, of frustration, of irritation, anger, whatever it is, whatever the emotions are, right? Is there nevertheless still something to whom they all occur, which simply is effortlessly?
Yeah. I get all this intellectually, and I also do get it. Like, it's just in those moments, it's like I've forgotten it, you know,
Yes. Right.
re-identifying with what I'm not, and then there's suffering, and then realizing that that was me and never was me, and then there's peace. I guess it's just a matter of practice and staying in the peace, staying with my true nature, knowing my true nature.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, because like you say, it's the forgetfulness that matters, right? Because if in that moment, I mean, and this is the profound irony, right? So I mean, ironically, in some sense, um, if you can, quote unquote, remain without having forgotten, so to say, or without having lost your attention, um, and therefore being, in some sense, unaffected by even your internal feelings of frustration and anger and bodily tension, um, then, in some sense, ironically, those feelings stop bothering you. But it's in a different way, because there is a sense in which, I mean, because if you remember that core and you don't respond, I mean, you tell me. I mean, rather than me telling you, when you were in that day and a half of surrender in that spa-like relaxation, what was your relationship to your emotions?
Exactly. There was like plenty of thoughts coming. I'm talking about thoughts now, not emotions, but I'll go through that first. And there was the letting go of them. You know, they might be quite negative and just pure random, because I know from doing a lot of meditation, like the most random of thoughts can come up, like not related to you at all, or but then a lot of it is related to, like, you know, what this person might think of me, or, you know, just stuff that's going on in your life, and I just kind of smile at them. So when I am surrendering and feeling at peace, there's a constant moment by moment letting go of everything that's arising, right?
Yes.
And well, not even letting go, like you said, non-identification with them being me. Just I am aware of them, so then I'm at peace. Yeah.
In some sense, when that concentration, sort of on the core of your being, so to say, becomes very strong. I mean, I'll give you. There's a great story actually about speaking of this question of of being bothered, not being bothered, and what is the relationship between the core and thoughts and so on. So there's a story of so there's a very famous Hindu king named Janaka. Janaka is supposed to be an enlightened king from like the ancient past, and he's often quoted in some scriptures as talking about enlightenment. So there's a story of someone who comes to him, and I think wants to learn about enlightenment. And so he tells him, okay, well, I don't have time to talk right now, but I want you to go see my city while I'm busy during the day. But there's one proviso. So I'm going to have my guards accompany you, and you're going to have a pot of water on your head. And as you walk around the city, they've been told that if a single drop of water from that pot spills, they're to kill you. So at the end of the day, they come back and meet each other, and the king says to him, well, hey, how'd you like my city? And what do you think he says?
Fuck your city.
Well, did he experience the city is the question.
No.
No, exactly. His attention was all on the pot, right? So there's no attention for the rest of the city at all.
Sorry, my Irishness coming out. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, it's a good one.
And that's what it is, right? So when you've withdrawn your attention, right? Like the goings on in the city, they may or may not. Can they even be said to be going on? It's a good question, right? Because you could say they're going on, but they don't affect me, or you could say they're going on, but I don't pay attention. But in some very fundamental sense, there is that, it's like that Zen koan. If a tree falls in the forest and you're not there to hear it, doesn't make a sound. It's exactly the same thing, right? If there are goings on, either in the quote unquote physical world or in your mental world of emotions, but you're not paying attention to them, do they go on?
Right. Okay.
That's why ultimately it's said that in some mysterious deep sense there is no experience, because you see, like it takes an identification, which is essentially a kind of deliberate paying attention, to acknowledge experience as experience. If your attention is withdrawn and held, relaxed, right, the whole world could be on fire. You may just not even notice it, essentially.
Right.
Or you're ensconced, essentially. But when I say the whole world is on fire, I mean even the mind, quote unquote. What does it even mean for the mind to be? I mean, again, what does it mean? Could you have an emotion but not be aware of it? Would it matter? I mean, these are all like philosophical questions. But the point is, in some sense, it doesn't matter. It's not to say there's a difference between saying, I'm aware that I'm not angry, right? Versus, which is, that's one version of inner peace, right? Like an absence of negative emotions, okay? But that this other version, which is what I'm talking about, is there's a lack of attention paid to that whole sphere. So no one can say whether it's anger or lack of anger. Right. No one can even say that it is at all, because you're just not looking, right? That's not where your eyes are pointed, essentially.
Right. You're kind of ignoring all the nonsense.
You're ignoring it all. Exactly.
Yeah. And actually, you asked me to describe my experience when I had a day and a half of, abiding or whatever, in surrender. I guess there was kind of just an ignoring of everything, and my attention was on that spa-like surrenderedness, or my attention is on the self more often then.
Yes, that's right. That's exactly right.
Aware.
I mean, the other aspect of this, right? Like, so there's two aspects, right? So one is the practice of keeping your concentration there on, let's say, surrender. But the other aspect of it, which is inevitably it's the other flip side of the coin, which is the self-inquiry side of the coin, which is in some ways that's what we've been talking about for the last few minutes, is who is it that's surrendering, right? Because that's the thing you have to contemplate in the back of your mind, is because otherwise we have this model, right, which is it's okay for a long time. Actually, it's fine to have a model of practice, concentrate, keep your attention within, don't let it be distracted by these external things, including your emotions. So it's fine to have that model. But at the same time, in the back of your mind, what you want to have is this question of, because that's still an effort, who is it that has to exert this effort to keep concentrating, right? Like you said, right? During that moment of so-called forgetfulness, uh, nobody was really affected by that, right? I mean, that's, as you say, an intellectual knowing, right? But what you need to build is essentially a profound inner curiosity as to who is it that's baffled by this, quote unquote, non-intellectually, right? Who is it, in other words, that doesn't realize that they're nobody? This is the kind of paradox we're confronted with, right? The idea is we want to get out of the state where you even have to put in that effort to concentrate, right? I mean, it's fine. It's fine to do it. But at the same time, we also want to know, which is itself a kind of concentration. Mm-hmm. Who is it that lost the spotlight concentration and became agitated or forgetful in the store, right? Who is that person?
So do you have this kind of contemplation question at the back of your mind all the time so that it really pops up in situations to...
I mean, sure. I mean, it's fine to just focus on surrender. It's fine. And we can even just think about this here. I would, if surrender is working for you, stay with surrender. But I mean, it can be a kind of organic flow, because sometimes surrender will be, you'll find itself slipping away, and then you'll be like, yeah, but what is slipping away? Then bring in self-inquiry and say, what is slipping? Who is it? Bring your attention to the I, because when I ask these questions, right, what I'm really asking is, turn your attention to the light that's aware of all of this.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
So
what is that?
Them. If one seems to stop or go still, switch to the other.
That's right. That's exactly right. Because right now, I mean, what is that? I mean, if I ask, maybe we should do a few minutes of self-inquiry. What do you think?
Okay.
So let's give it 5 minutes. Let's give it 5 minutes. Let's just focus on the I. Yeah. All right. All right. So that was 5 minutes.
Oh, okay.
So how was that?
Intense at the start. I find it tough to describe self-inquiry, but just constantly looking for the I feeling. My attention is going to my legs are cramped sensations there. Then I'm like, okay, what's aware of that? And then it just keeps going to places, and then what's aware of that?
Mhm.
Then eventually got to kind of just staring into one space and trying to hold on what's aware,
Yeah,
uh, on
that's
awareness.
right. That's perfect. I mean, that's exactly right. And you know, another thing that occurred to me is just to sort of put that in context, right? Because there is something about that, right? So you know, there is in self-inquiry that the situation of trying to hold something which you're not quite sure what it even is, right? And like you're saying, you're eventually your mind sort of quiets and maybe starts just staring into the blankness. That's fine. That's totally fine because that's still collecting your thoughts essentially in your attention to the point when the obvious will be revealed, which and it is the obvious. I was just thinking to myself, you know, I should bring in another angle here. So we have, you know, we have surrender, we have self-inquiry, which is this attentional exercise, but it might be helpful as well to think in terms of so the traditional way, in sort of the very traditional Vedantic way of understanding all of this is what's called jnana yoga. Jnana yoga means like the yoga of knowledge, right? And the idea was um, essentially the core of enlightenment is simply uh, just this very obvious fact that you can understand in a sense. I mean, there is a sense in which this is so. Okay, so let me just go through it with you very quickly. So the idea is, right, and it's the idea underlying self-inquiry anyway, is the same thing, is that you are not that which you are aware of.
Right.
And so, you know, knowing that, for example, we would say, okay, you know, well, I'm not the body, I'm not any particular thought, I'm not any particular feeling, right? Um, and then, you know, we come quickly to, um, am I awareness? Does that make sense?
Right.
Right? Am I awareness? Well, a distinction has to be drawn then between awareness as we know it in the waking state. Okay, so because you're aware that you're aware, right?
Mhm.
Right. So then, by our reasoning and self-inquiry, you can't be that awareness that you think you are,
Because it's known to me.
because it's known to you. So you know, so you notice, right? This is again the traditional way of reasoning, right? That you're aware in the waking state in a certain way. That when you dream, you're aware in a somewhat different way. But you're still aware.
Mhm.
And then in deep sleep, well, there is a rub, right? Are you aware? So the traditional reason would be like, yes, you are aware. You are aware, but you're just aware in an extremely different way. You're
There's
aware
no,
of
there's no objects to be aware of.
there's
So
no objects to be aware of. So that which is quote unquote aware of all these three states is what you are,
right.
right? What is aware even of the quote unquote state of unconsciousness is what you are. And that way, that's why it cannot be changed by any of the goings on in any of the states, right? Because it's beyond even, this is why it says beyond even being and non being, right? Because in a state of deep sleep, seemingly, you know, from the waking standpoint, deep sleep is like a state of non being, right?
Okay.
But actually, to the true self, it's a form of being. It's just the being of, as you say, a lack of objects.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, it does and it doesn't.
It does
As
and it doesn't.
yeah,
I mean, So what doesn't make sense about it? I'm curious.
No,
Just think about this. Let's just think. I'm just curious.
It does, as in it intellectually does make sense, but I mean, I'm just taking your word for it at the moment.
Right.
That
I mean,
that awareness that we are is different to the awareness that I know. That would make sense. So in that sense, you can never know yourself.
or you always know yourself. It's just that the way in which you know yourself is different in these three states.
Okay.
So, right? Because the idea is, the idea behind jnana yoga is to try to get you to sort of see, like, or maybe see is the wrong word, but knowing that you are beyond the three states, right? Because we'll come back to it in a second, but knowing that you are between beyond the three states, therefore you're free. This is jnana yoga simply says you are free. You're free right now.
Yeah.
So the question is, of course, you'd be like, well, I don't feel free. You might say, right? So there. I mean, the traditional method is you hear this truth. This is called shravana. So shravana, manana, nididhyasana. Shravana means hearing. Manana means contemplation and resolving of doubts. Nididhyasana means putting it into practice. But basically, what you're doing is jnana yoga is fundamentally about hearing, right? So just hearing this fact, right? The fact is that there is something which is aware of the entire waking state. There is something with the same something is aware of the entire dreaming state. And that same something is aware of the entire deep sleep state. And because, therefore, that something which is aware of all three states, it can endure radical shifts in its identity, right? Because you're totally different in your waking state than your dreaming state. And it can endure total shifts in level of consciousness, because from total unconsciousness in the deep sleep state to relatively more consciousness in the waking state, right? It's a continuum, right? It can endure every kind of change, and yet it is.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, the question to ask yourself is, what about this picture do I doubt, right? To be honest about what is it that, because it's, in a way, it's not about taking my word for it. It's about asking yourself, what is my doubt about this picture? Because this, in a way, knowing this, the jnana yoga approach is, knowing this, you're free. You are free, because what you are is that thing which is beyond these three states, right? So all the narrative about agitation, concentration, doing this, doing that, etc. I mean, it's fine from one perspective. We have one angle, but I'm bringing this other angle in, which is simply this thought that you are that already. So therefore, what's the problem?
Okay, well, what I'll say is that with spirituality compared to religion, religion is kind of like, belief systems or whatever, believing in certain ideologies, whereas spirituality, there's maybe a spiritual guru or teacher might say something, and then you can go away and realize that. And a lot has been realized for me so far in terms of, like, how far I've come. Once there was more identification with the mind, thinking that those thoughts are me. And so now, like, I do believe you, or want to believe you, that's right, but I want to be able to realize it.
Right. But and what I'm getting at is this very notion of realizing it. As I said, I'm coming at it from a different angle than I've come at it before, which is to say, who is realizing it, right? So if you are, right? I mean, this is the thing to contemplate. It's like a koan, right? If you are this thing which is beyond the three states, right? What's to realize it, in effect? I mean, this thought is the realization, This is that contemplating this, the mind, I mean, so because you see that, I mean, this is the paradox, right? The realization is that there is no such thing as realization in some sense, right? Because to whom could the realization affect? Who is ignorant? Who is realizing it? I mean, maybe the doubt is that you don't believe, for example, that you really are in the deep sleep state. A lot of people would say, like, how is it the case that I am in the deep sleep state? How do I know that I am in the deep? Is that a doubt that you have?
No, it's not something I've really contemplated or thought about too much. But like, I mean, you have to exist, right? You can't just stop existing for deep sleep and then suddenly you come into existence. Well, logically, that's what I would think. Um, I had a profound psychedelic experience in college where we went to play like miniature golf and ended up finding lots of magic mushrooms and taking them. And well, anyway, I forgot I was a human being, and all there was like infinite blackness, like for like what seemed like infinity. Um, and this is before I knew anything about spirituality or anything. It was just years later I kind of put two and two together. But then I was like kind of reborn, or I remembered that I was a human and I came down or whatever.
Mm-hmm,
But
mm-hmm.
then it was like, oh my God, I'm a person. It was like, it's tough to explain, but um, yeah.
No, that makes sense. I mean, I think it's a kind of representation of an effect. It's a kind of symbolization of the truth. Is what I would say.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
know, I mean, another way of looking at it is, I mean, so I want to bring these other angles in because it's helpful, right? Because what fundamentally realization is it's contemplating that thought which burns up all the other thoughts, right? So in a way, it's a kind of, like I say, a koan, right? To ask yourself, what is it that is constant between now deep sleep and dream, right? It's not waking awareness. So what is it? What could it be?
Right. Of
You know,
course, it can't be waking awareness because it's not there in deep sleep.
so what does it mean to say awareness that is not waking awareness? What does that mean? Or does it mean anything? I mean, that's the question. Essentially, you have to essentially grapple with. And another way of putting it is this. But these are, as I say, these are the other angles, right? So knowing that waking awareness cannot be you, that you must be that which is aware of the waking, aware of the dream, and aware of deep sleep, right? Which therefore, so knowing that, I mean, what happens? Thinking about that, what happens?
What happens when
What happens right now when I say that? What do you experience? When I say that you are that which is aware of waking, dream, and deep sleep, which is not any of them, which is not the awareness in the waking, not the awareness in the dream, not the awareness in the deep sleep, but that to whom all those three states occur.
I believe you. Like there's no doubts or thoughts going, this guy's crazy, or you know, I mean,
So where is that? Where is that? Where is that? That which is aware of all of those.
where is it?
Yeah.
No idea.
It's here right now. The answer is it's here right now.
Of course it's here right now, but it's like no objective qualities, right? It's just
in a way, all of this, it's exactly like trying to get a fish to see the water around it. That's exactly what it's like. It's like it's so.
But it is possible.
So obvious. It is possible, but absolutely it's possible. But at the same time, it requires a breaking of that very word possible. Because for whom is it possible? There is something which there's a twist, which is so simple. It's again it's like seeing the obvious, but who is seeing it? In whom is all this seeing occurring? This is what I'm getting at. There's something which is incommunicable, and which all of these methods are trying to get you to see this thing which can't quite be said, right? Like it's something which is so obvious, which it's trying to get you to see the obvious, right? Through surrender, through self-inquiry, and through, through thinking about this idea of, well, even thinking about it, who am I? If I'm not my thoughts or my feelings, if I'm not even my waking awareness, who could I be? I mean, I say don't think about it usually, but there is an element, you can think about it to some extent as well. Who are you then? What does it mean? Let me give you another angle on it too. This is what Ramana Maharshi used to say, and I may have already said this to you before, but I'll say it again. So, in that moment, if you've ever had a moment when you've just woken up, have I used this metaphor with you before?
Where you just woke up and you don't even know who you are or something. Right?
That's right, precisely. So right, so
I tried to experience that since, but I'm not sure if I did. I think I might know what you're talking about, though.
Well, it would make sense if you don't quite know, because even remembering that experience, it becomes a part of your memory.
Right.
What we're talking about is something which is by definition you can't quite remember because it's not in your memory. There is that moment where sometimes when you wake up, like you say, just before memory has descended, and there is that indescribable, unrememberable blank state, so to say. Let's call it that.
You exist.
Yeah, you exist, and you can't even say that you exist because there's nobody to say you exist, right? Even the saying "I exist" that's something after the fact that we say that. There's no duality because even to say "I exist," you're drawing on words and ideas, and you're drawing on like that. You're drawing on memory, basically. But in that, there's no notion of I exist. There's no notion of I don't exist. There's no notion of I. There's no notion at all. There's just whatever it is. So that blankness, which is peace, is now the case, right this second.
It is. It has to be.
Yeah, and so you are that. So in a way, I mean, contemplating all of this, right? So I want you to take these two tracks at once, right? Which is practice on the one hand, and practice can be broken down into surrender and self-inquiry. But on the other hand, the other track is, which is connected intimately, is, but what is practice when I'm already that? And what does it mean to say I'm already that? Who is already that?
So constant questioning.
Because what is it that is constant in your experience? That's essentially going on, right? But through all of this, right, we are caught in words right now, right? Where like you said, you were identified with the mind prior more. Now you're identified with it less. You've had some good experiences of surrender. These are all experiences of change.
Yeah.
But what has been changeless throughout it all? Even when you were so-called identified with the mind, there was something which was changeless then too. That's the same as it is now.
Big question. Yeah. Relative versus absolute. God damn it.
I mean, when you drop all of thought, I mean, these are all different ways of getting to it. You see that?
Yeah.
You see that has always been the case. It doesn't matter whether you identify or not.
No, I've followed so many teachings, and some resonate more than others, but I can see what they're all pointing towards the same thing. But yeah, it's not.
No. I mean, it's fine. I mean, it's just something. It's something to keep contemplating, right? And this is why. Did you? I'm guessing you didn't get a chance to read much, or did you?
I read some of your book, but not enough of it to really go into it with you yet. You went on a lot about like comparing it to movies and stuff,
metaphors,
and movies
yes.
that I've liked in the past, Truman Show, Matrix, that kind of thing. But no, the best stuff is yet to come.
And as I said, read if you can read the bits of Ramana Maharshi. Yes.
No, I actually have the urge to do it now after this session. This session has been different, like so. More questioning and contemplation, and I think I want to read more Ramana Maharshi now.
Because so this is the Yes. So this is the dual tack I want you to think along, right? Practice through surrender. Essentially, that's a kind of practice. And you get tired of surrender, you can turn to self-inquiry, and you get tired of self-inquiry, you go back to surrender, or you can just stay with surrender, whatever you want.
Yeah.
But in the back of your mind, you're always thinking, but who's doing this? Who's the one who's trapped, supposedly trapped by ignorance? Who's the one who's quote unquote forgetting? Like, okay. Who is the one? Am I this person who has to exert all this effort? There's a story of, there's a paradox, because on the one hand, aspirants are told to exert effort, and there is a sense in which that's required and necessary to practice. But on the other hand, there's another sense, a deeper sense, and a more important sense in which, like I say, there just is what there is already. Mm-hmm. There is that peace, there is that perfection already the case. You are already that which is experiencing all this, right? It's only because you're identifying, and is someone identifying? Who is identifying? Who is identifying? Who can be said to be identifying with all of this? Is that you? And you might say, so this is where I want you to think. Who am I? So there are many ways of going about it, right? So one is focus.
Who am I?
Yeah, that's truly. You can truly just think about it too. It's not a bad thing. If you aren't that which you're aware of, what does that really mean?
Yeah, when we keep talking about the same things going round and round in circle, it kind of boggles the mind, right?
Yeah.
All words stop to make any sense whatsoever.
And that's good, because
I
guess
what a lot of this questioning kind of leads to that too. It's like more putting you into a no mind state.
And what is aware of that no mind state?
I am.
Yeah. Exactly. So that's right. So knowing that you are, then what's the problem? You see, this is we have to provoke this conversation, right? We have to provoke this.
There's
question.
no problem. There's no
That's
problem.
right. There is no problem.
No.
That's right. But 5 minutes from now, there will be. No, there's that part. You have to return to that.
I've come a long way since meeting you, and just since, say, 2 years ago when, so yeah.
So think about these things. Read some more pages of Ramana Maharishi if you can, and stay with what you've been doing. Stay with surrender, but also deeply think about this question. What does it mean to say that you are not even waking awareness? What does it mean to say that you are that which is aware of waking awareness and aware of deep sleep? What does that make you? Really try to give that question some thought, and find it in your own experience. What does that mean that I am? These words are being said, they sound okay. Yeah, I might trust my, the teacher, but find it in yourself. What is it referring to? Yeah. What does it mean? Something very simple. It's something which is so simple. Like you say, it's the no mind state, but what is that no mind state? That no mind state is something which right now is occurring to you with a beginning and an end, right? Like, okay, the words are leading me to that no mind state, and then I'm out of that no mind state. What is it that was constant even before the no mind state started and is there after it ended? What's that thing which is constant?
Yeah.
So that's what you should think about. It's the same thing which surrender leads you to, which self-inquiry leads you to, and these words lead you to. Mm-hmm. What's the thing which is constant?
Yeah.
Read Ramana Maharishi.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So all right. So you feel comfortable with me posting some of this or all of this online?
Absolutely. The way I see it, it's all part of the greater good. So if it can get you some good content or something, then absolutely.
All right. Okay. So I'm going to take a look at it, and I'll figure it out.
Hopefully the quality is not completely shit.
All
right.
all right.
I'll
So
be in touch.
be in touch. You know, if you feel the need, I mean, absolutely, I love hearing your emails or anything like that. Just shoot me an email. You know, with any of your experiences along these lines.
Okay, Ak. Great
All
stuff.
right.
Talk
Take
to you later.
care. Talk to you next
Bye.
week. Bye.
Bye.